Caution. The AJ and Quill show contains D&D content and is intended for a D&D audience. And, besides that, they're really weird.
Faith, reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a throw of the dice with endless possibilities, where a single roll can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the one you know. Each an adventure through what could have been. Each life a humble D4 in a multiverse of infinite possibilities. Is a destiny determined by your nature, or the nature of the world? Nothing will be the same. I am Quill the Observer. I am your guide through these vast new possibilities. Follow me and dare to hear the knowledge Quill will dispense with his mighty jaws as we explore the question, what if? More than battles won or lost, it's relationships that truly define a hero. The people who shape them and their stories. Imagine if you will here, Grog Strongjaw, a young boy abandoned rather than accepted by his herd, then found by the most unlikely of people, the Ashari.
Well, what would happen? That's a really good question. Would he become a monk? Would he follow the warrior of the elements? Well, let's explore what that looks like and show you how to do it. Now, you're never going to make a good monk if all you're doing is watching videos where somebody else reads the ability or the spell directly from the player's guide and then just tells you if they think it's good or not. That's not helpful. Telling somebody a Lamborghini is a really fast car isn't helpful when the person doesn't know how to drive. So you need to know your role in combat. Optimizing your character for combat is pretty useless if you don't know what you're supposed to do or how to do it. So don't focus so much on optimizing your character. Just make the character that you want and then optimize your tactics. So what is a monk's role in combat? Well, we're going to show you, but the player's guide helps you out a lot with that. Under each character class, you can scroll down and you'll see something called the core class traits. Inside that little box, you'll see something called the primary ability. Your role in combat is determined by two things: how you attack things and how you defend yourself. Your stats kind of dictate how you fight in combat. And right here it's showing you that a monk's primary ability that it's going to use to attack things is dexterity. And the primary ability it's going to use to defend itself is also dexterity and a little bit of wisdom. But that comes more into play with class features, but dexterity is the important one. So if you go under the standard array by class, this gives you kind of a guide for how to arrange your stats. If you look at the monk here, you can see that dexterity is the highest at 15. Its secondary ability, wisdom here, second highest. Con should be the third. Yeah, con's the third at 13. And then just kind of they disperse these however they feel. The point is you don't have to do this exactly, but it gives you a good guide. And bare minimum, as long as your primary ability is the highest, you're going to have a perfectly fine character. And once you know this, that'll help you determine your background. If you go to the ability scores and backgrounds, just find the ability score that's your primary one, and then any of these are perfectly fine to pick as backgrounds. And if you can also manage to snag your secondary ability in there, like for monks it's wisdom, you can see that guide, sailor, scribe, wayfarer is covered by both covers both dexterity and wisdom here. Any of those backgrounds is a great background for a monk. But if that doesn't work for you, then just talk to your DM and make one up. You're allowed to do that. Just pick a background, pick the feat, pick the stats you want, make the perfect character for you. It's a role-playing game. Just do what you like. Now, something else you need to know about monks is monks have a resource that they spend called focus. It's kind of like a well of energy that they have inside themselves that they then release to enhance what they're already doing. So they hit harder, they hit more, they move more, all that monk cool stuff. Point is, focus is super important to a monk, and they need to spend that focus to be efficient in combat. If you're not spending focus, you're not doing it right. And because focus recharges on a short or a long rest, it means that every single combat, you should be trying to spend all of your focus. If you have any left over at the end of a combat, you're doing it wrong.
Hold up! Wait a minute!
If you have any left over at the end of a combat, you're doing it wrong. Now that you know how a monk attacks and how it defends itself, how does that play into combat? Well, a monk is a melee fighter because they rely so much on unarmed strikes, so they have to be in melee. And if your primary attack and defense for a melee fighter is dexterity, that means they're going to fight most efficiently as a hit and run damage dealer. But what does that really look like? So, if Grog Strongjaw was raised by the Ashari, well, if he's a 4 elements monk, his name would be different. Instead of Grog Strongjaw, we're going to call him Jaeger Shockjaw. He is a storm giant Goliath background 4 elements monk, or warrior of the elements monk. He's level 17, but this is what we think he would look like. So how does this character, this new Grog in this new timeline, actually work in combat? Well, we're going to show you. So here's a makeshift combat we have. Here's our monk. Here's Jaeger. Carly, she agreed to be our tank for this little scenario. Thanks very much. And we have a bunch of goblin enemies. Okay. So if you're a hit and run damage dealer like a monk, this is your Miropod. This is your carrots, your celery, your onions. Every monk is going to work like this, or every monk can use this as a starting place and then just build on it. Because each monk is going to get a subclass. The subclasses just allow you to do a better job of what you're already doing. And we'll explain how this particular subclass changes the tactics. But this is the base that everybody's going to use, and this is the important part. So, at the start of combat, your monk, you want to be about half your movement speed away from the front line of combat. If you don't know what the front line of combat is, it's basically here. Okay? It's where the bulk of the melee fighting is going on. It's where your tank is going to be standing, usually, if they're doing their job properly. If you're still not sure what that means, just stay about half your movement speed away from whatever target you're planning on hitting. So if Jaeger's going to hit this orc, he needs to be about half his movement speed from that orc. And usually you're going to want to hit where your tank is hitting, just to double down on the damage. So a monk in the early levels, about half their movement speed is going to be about 20 feet. So here 5, 10, 15, 20. So if Jaeger can, he's going to start about this far away. Then on his turn, first thing, he's going to spend half his movement, 5, 10, 15, 20, to get into combat. Once there, he's going to use his action to attack. Now, before 5th level, monks can only attack once with their unarmed strike or their monk weapon. At 5th and beyond, they can attack twice, and they can also attempt something called a stunning strike. Level 5, here's your extra attack, there's a stunning strike. A stunning strike is kind of iconic for monks. Basically, all it means is when you hit them with an unarmed strike, you can force them to make a con saving throw. You got to spend a focus for that, but force them to make a con saving throw. If they fail, they get the stun condition, which is deadly. Even if they succeed, however, their speed is still halved, and until the start of your next turn, the next attack roll made against that target has advantage. So even if they succeed, they're still debuffed. This is really useful. So at the start of combat, you're going to attack, and the first time you hit this target, you're going to try and stun them. Now, stunning is amazing because it does a bunch of cool things. Most importantly, it gives them the incapacitated condition. Incapacitated is deadly in this game because it takes away their action, bonus action, reactions. They can't concentrate on spells. They can't speak. And if you're incapacitated, when you roll initiative, you have disadvantage on it. That's all huge. The other thing they don't say is that a lot of things get ended by incapacitated. So a druid's wild shape, a barbarian's rage, most or any spell that requires concentration, and a whole bunch of other abilities, even some the monk has, will get ended if they're incapacitated. That's why stunned is so deadly. On top of that, it also makes it so that you fail strength and dex saves automatically, and attack rolls against you have advantage. So the first time you hit, you want to attempt to stun a creature. Now, it's not really worth to continue doing that. Like, if the first stun didn't hit and you hit them again, don't keep trying to stun them in the same round. It's not really worth it because you're going to burn through your focus really quick. But it's worth trying at least once. So your monk moves in, attacks, tries to stun, and this is where you get to make a decision. This is where your tactics are going to start coming into play. If the orc is stunned, they failed their save and they're now stunned, your monk is going to use their bonus action to flurry of blows. Hit them twice because they're vulnerable, you get advantage on the hits, a lot of cool stuff. And then, once that's done, you're going to retreat back the other half of your movement to where you started from. Or somewhere else away from the combat, so you're making it hard for them to hit you. Ideally, if you can get behind some cover or even hide, that's perfect, but that'll depend on your combat. Just do your best. As long as you're away from it, that's the hit and run. You see how that works? They run in, they hit, and then they leave. Hit and run. Now, the other important thing is, let's say when you did your attack, the stun didn't work. Well, you still have advantage on this hit, but it's going to change what you use your bonus action for. So instead of using Flurry of Blows or attacking with your bonus action against this not stunned creature, you're going to do something else. Under your focus, if you look here, it says Patient Defense. You can do this just as a bonus action. You don't got to spend focus for it, but you can take the Disengage action. That's what you're going to do. You can also, if you spend a focus, you can take Disengage and Dodge. We'll double down on kind of your protection, but you don't need to do that. Just take Patient Defense. That way you can disengage, and then when you leave combat to do the run part of your hit and run, they can't hit you with opportunity attacks. You would also use this if you were, say, surrounded by multiple creatures. In this case, if Jaeger tried to leave combat without disengaging, this orc, this goblin, and this goblin would all get opportunity attacks. It isn't worth flurrying of blows in this case. You should come in, disengage, and then leave regardless. But that's more fine-tuning it. Point is, you run in, hit. If they're stunned, flurry of blows. If not, you patient defense, and after both, you return. That's it. That's hit and run. And if you just do this, you're going to be a great addition to any party. So now you have your base. You can then explore what the subclasses are going to do to change those tactics. But you're always going to start with that same mirepoix. Move in, hit, get out. So we're saying Grog, being raised by the Ashari, he became a Warrior of the Elements monk, which are great because these Warrior of the Elements tap into the elemental planes, harnessing supernatural forces. They get from the elemental chaos, which is part of the D&D cosmology. It's like where the building blocks of life and reality come from. So they don't specifically tap into any one elemental plane. They kind of get all of them, so they can change their elements around. It's not like Avatar where they only got fire or air or water, etc. So level 3, when you pick this subclass, you're going to get two things. You're going to get Elemental Attunement, which at the start of your turn, you can spend one focus point and give yourself elemental energy. It lasts for 10 minutes, unless you become incapacitated. That's important, because if you remember, stunned will incapacitate. That's why incapacitate's such a deadly thing. It ends a ton of abilities. Anyway, you gain the following features. 1, your unarmed strikes, their reach is increased by 10 feet. And 2, you do elemental damage instead of your regular damage. And it's that same elemental damage. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. On top of that, when you deal one of these types of damage with it, you can then force the creature to make a strength saving throw. Really cool because, again, if they're stunned, they automatically fail strength saving throws. So you can just move them around and they get no rolls at all. If they fail a strength saving throw, you can move the target up to 10 feet towards or away from you as elemental energy swirls around it. Those are great abilities, and they help your monk, specifically Jaeger, do more of what he's already doing. But it doesn't change the tactics that much. So at the start of combat, first thing a monk is going to do is activate your elemental attunement. This is super important. You don't even want to think about this. Just do it at the start of every combat, because a lot of other things key off this. And this is kind of how your fighting style is set up. So activate your elemental attunement. You're still going to be about half your movement speed away, but then to that, just add 10. Half your movement speed plus 10. That accounts for this increased range. Now, start your combat, you activate your elemental attunement, then use half your movement speed to get to that maximum of your range from your hit. So normally he would only be able to hit things 5 feet away. Because it increases by 10, 5, 10, Jaeger can now hit this orc from this far away. So you move in, Going to use your attack action to attack this orc twice. Try to stun them on the first hit, same as before. If they're stunned, same thing. Flurry of blows, retreat to where you started from. If they're not stunned, however, what you're going to do then instead is flurry of blows and retreat to where you started from. It doesn't change. This ability lets you flurry of blows way more often because you don't need to patient defense to get out of combat. You're not close enough to trigger an opportunity attack from their reach. So you can just come in and flurry of blows every round now. You don't have to patient defense. Super awesome, very useful, great for a monk. Now, the other part where you can move that creature 10 feet, you're going to use that to kind of protect your allies or to make things better for them. So if you're this far away and let's say Jaeger attacks this orc, if they're stunned, they're going to automatically fail those strength saving throws. Even if they're not stunned, they still have to roll. What you're going to do is you're going to use that to either push an enemy away from an ally who's in danger, like if a Karlach was going to die, you push the enemy away so that she can leave or get a little bit of a breather, or you're going to bring enemies within their reach so that that character doesn't have to move. Tanks don't move around very much. A lot of other things key off of where the tank is standing, so they tend to be very unmobile, which means Karlach can't get at this goblin without triggering opportunity attacks or causing problems. But if you're helping her out, you can go here and you can pull this goblin towards you so she can now attack it. That's how you use this ability. The other way to do it would be as if there was say a hazard or like a trap. You can push the enemy into it or off a cliff or something. That's being useful. That's when you would use that ability. You see how that hit and run still is in effect? They hit it and then they leave. Next, they also get manipulate elements. They learn the elementalism cantrip. This is kind of a cool way to show they still have that elemental energy going through them, even outside of combat, because this is more of a role-playing thing. But if you can figure out a way to use this in combat, all the power to you. Level 6. They get Elemental Burst. This is kind of like a mini fireball. Right? As a magic action, that's what you're giving up. Right? You spend 2 focus points and cause elemental energy to make a 20-foot radius sphere centered at a point you see within 120 feet of yourself, dealing acid, cold, fire, lightning, thunder damage. Each creature in the sphere, they got to make a dex save, which stunned makes them fail dex saves, so use that stun if you can. If they fail, they take 3 times your martial arts damage dice. If they succeed, they still take half as much. So how that plays in combat is you're only going to use this for 2 reasons. Let's say your monk cannot get into melee combat. Jaeger used all of his abilities, he was too far away. He used his Step of the Wind to dash, he got there, he still has his action, but he cannot reach combat. And maybe he doesn't have a ranged weapon. Point is, you would use that elemental burst in this scenario. So it's a 20-foot radius sphere, right there. That's huge. And you would just center it on to get as many enemies in that area as possible. Something to keep in mind, though, is you want to get at least 2. You're giving up your action to do this. With their action, a monk can attack twice. So if you gave up 2 attacks, you want to at least make that back. I'm saying 2 rather than a higher number because it's a saving throw, and the way that those things intrinsically work is attack rolls assume that you missed, you got to roll a dice to prove you hit. Saving throws assumed you hit, and they have to roll a dice to prove that you didn't. So even if they succeed, they're still taking 1.5 times my martial arts damage. That's basically what he gave up by giving up his action, and the monk still has his bonus action. So if you can hit at least 2 creatures and you can't get into combat, that's when you would use this. If there was also a giant cluster of enemies, if they were all next to each other and you could get a ton of them in that area of effect, that's more efficient than just hitting something twice. So then you would use it then. But generally speaking, you want to get at least 2, and if you can't get into melee combat. The other thing to remember, there's friendly fire on this. So if Karlach was in that area of effect, she would also be affected and have to make that save. You don't want to damage your allies because that's doing the enemy's job for them, and that's just bad tactics. Level 11. Stride of the Elements. While your elemental attunement is active, you get a flying speed and a swim speed equal to your speed. That's why you want to activate elemental attunement at the start of your combat. A lot of other things key off of it. This basically makes it so that you don't have to worry about difficult terrain. Monks need to be mobile. So difficult terrain really messes them up. Being able to ignore difficult terrain is very useful on Monk. Even though it doesn't seem flashy, that's a great thing to use. Level 17, this is kind of your capstone for the Warrior of the Elements Monk. Elemental Epitome. While your Elemental Attunement is active, so again, make sure you activate this, it's very important. Start of your first turn every combat, you gain the following benefits. You gain damage resistance to one of those same elements you can use. You just pick whichever one you want, so you're not dumb. If it's a fire-breathing dragon, pick fire. Next, Destructive Stride. When your Step of the Wind is active, your speed increases by 20 feet. Okay, so Step of the Wind takes a bonus action to use. You gain the dash action. You don't got to spend focus for this. If you do, you get more bonuses. You can also take the disengage action, and there's other stuff you get later on. This is the important part, though. For this particular ability, you're almost always going to want to spend that focus point to use dash and disengage. The reason being is, for the duration of this Step of the Wind, the creature takes damage equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die when you enter space within 5 feet of it. So when you walk by them, and the damage is those elementals. Note, it does not have to match your resistance. You could pick one of these and a different one of these. So if you're fighting a dragon that breathes fire, you can pick fire as the resistance and cold as the damage. You can mix those up. The creature can take this damage only once per turn. And lastly, you get Empowered Strikes. Once on each of your turns, you deal extra damage to a target equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die when you hit with an unarmed strike. It's the same as the damage of the strike. So if you had your Elemental Attunement on, it's this damage. But this could be, say, lightning damage. You could then have resistance to fire damage, and your Destructive Stride could do cold damage. You can mix those. They don't all have to be the same one, that's the point. Anyway, this needs an unarmed strike, and Destructive Stride does not count as an unarmed strike, so you can't use it for that. But this is only going to take your bonus action. So this is how this plays in combat. You're only going to use it for 2 things. One, if you can pass by at least 3 enemies. Reason being is, at this level, if a monk uses Flurry of Blows, he can attack 3 times. That's what you're going to give up. So if you're giving that up, you want to make sure you get that back. So when you're doing this, you want to have at least 3 creatures that you can hit with that ability. So the way this plays out is, use your Step of the Wind to activate your Destructive Stride. Spend the focus point to do this so that you don't take opportunity attacks the whole time. And then make sure that as you're using that ability, you pass by at least 3, and where you end up, you're going to use your action to attack this creature twice, same as you normally would. The other time you use this is if you have to pass through these creatures, you don't have a choice, you might as well activate this to do the damage anyway. So let's say Jaeger was over here, Karlach was over here in trouble, that's where they gotta be, and there's all these enemies in the way. If Jaeger has to pass through them to get here, he might as well use this ability, because you have to do it. So he would activate the ability, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He would hit all these creatures along the way, and then appear to help Karlach, his tank, or whoever, if it was the mage or something. And then you would attack this creature using your action, try to stun them, same as you always done. That's when you would use this ability. When you're attacking after, once you get there and use your attack action, those unarmed strikes can also activate your Empowered Strikes. Don't forget about that. So you're going to use your bonus action first to Destructive Stride and run through all the enemies. And then once you use your attack action, that's when you get to use this. When you get this. And that's it. That's all the tactics for a monk. This is what we think would happen if Grog Strongjaw was raised by the Ashari and how we would fight in combat. You like this? Keep watching. Tune in for more. Subscribe. Do all that stuff. And we'll see you next time. Bye.